Alpha corrections. Question B. Consider an economy described by the following equations. Well, you've seen these equations before. The only difference is that we have a change in the personal income tax rate. Initially, you remember the personal income tax rate was 20% or 0.2. Now the personal income tax rate has moved to 40% or 0.4. So before we get into the calculations, let's speculate as to the answers. In other words, how will national income or Y change? How will disposable income change? And how will consumption and the budget surplus change? So let's try it. So here again, the personal income tax rate went from 20% to 40%. So we have an increase in T. So given this increase in T, what will probably happen is a decrease in disposable income, a decrease in consumption, a decrease in GDP. So I guess what we're going to expect about the budget surplus is for the budget surplus to go, let's see, a higher GDP will probably bring the budget surplus up. All right, let's see if our calculations verify these conceptual answers. Calculate Y. So once again, we start with the model equation. So the model equation is formulated this way: autonomous aggregate expenditures divided by 1 minus MPC plus MPC times T. Again, autonomous aggregate expenditures are autonomous C, autonomous I, autonomous G, autonomous X, or NX in this case, right? NX, for a total of 800. Another way put, autonomous aggregate expenditures have not changed. So what has changed? Well, again, NPC is at the same level, right? 0.8. What has changed is the personal income tax rate. It went from 20% to 40%. So 1 minus MPC is equal to 0.2. And if we multiply MPC times T, we will get 0.32. So the denominator is going to be equal to 0.52. And this number obviously belongs here in the denominator, 0.52. So what is our answer? Well, as we predicted, the GDP level went down from, you remember, $2,222.22 billion to $1,538.46 billion. Again, I insist that you go 2 decimal points. Another way put, Y1 is greater than Y1 is greater than Y2. Y2 is lower than Y1. Okay. Calculate YD. Well, once again, yd is equal to y minus ty. And what we have now is a lower GDP level and a higher tax rate. All right, we do the appropriate math and we come up with this answer, $923.08 billion. So our mathematical conclusion verifies our conceptual conclusion that if we increase the tax rate from 20% to 40%, then YD will go down. So that's the answer, YD decreasing from the initial $1,777.78 billion to $923.08 billion. Calculate C, or more precisely, calculate the change in C. So once again, the equation for the for total consumption is equal to autonomous consumption plus MPC times disposable income. All right. So again, no change in autonomous consumption. It is still $300 billion. No change in MPC, but a lower disposable income because of the increase in the personal income tax rate. So if we do the math correctly, our answer would be $1,038.46 billion. And indeed, this mathematical answer does verify the conceptual answer. So let's try again. An increase in T brought about a decrease in disposable income, which in turn brought about a decrease in consumption, in total consumption. All right, so that's the answer. Calculate budget deficit or budget surplus or a balanced budget. We started initially, you remember, with a budget surplus equaling to how much? $344.44 billion. What we're asked to do is to calculate the second budget surplus. All right, so that's the question. Okay, now let's see. The budget deficit or budget surplus or the balanced budget, in this case the budget surplus, is equal to tax revenues, which we state as T times Y, minus government outlays, which in this case is equal to only government spending of $100 billion. So the tax rate is 40%. The national income level, or Y, is lower. G is the same because it's an autonomous factor. And if we do the numbers correctly, we come up to BS2 equaling to $515.38 billion. All right. All right. So that's the answer. And we noticed that the budget surplus did indeed go up because the higher personal income tax rate, the increase in T, overwhelmed the decrease in GDP. And remember, GDP decreased because of an increase in the personal income tax rate. Now, once again, the question is, where does the money go? Well, again, the money goes into the financial pool in this domestic economy, and this money may be borrowed by consumers, domestic consumers, domestic firms, and of course foreigners can also pick away at this budget surplus that has been deposited by the government. That's the federal government, the local governments, in this so-called financial pool. And now for the graphing part. So what I want to show you next is how we graph this increase of the personal income tax rate from 20% to 40%. So let me draw this diagram. On the y-axis we have aggregate expenditures, origin of 0. On the x-axis, GDP, or gross domestic product. Out of the origin, we have the 45-degree help line. And remember that any point along this 45-degree help line represents an equilibrium, a point at which aggregate expenditures are equal to GDP. And then we have the origin of our first aggregate expenditure curve, which we labeled as AE curve 1. And this origin of this AE curve is at autonomous aggregate expenditures, which is equal to 800. So once again, what's the meaning of autonomous aggregate expenditures? Well, first of all, it's the addition of autonomous C plus autonomous I plus autonomous G plus autonomous NX. And autonomous means that it's not dependent on the fluctuations of the business cycle. It will remain the same. All right. All right. Now, the point at which this AE curve crosses the 45-degree help line, well, this is equilibrium. So let's label this as E1. And that equilibrium means that this level of aggregate expenditures is equal to, remember, $2,222.22 billion. And also, at that equilibrium level, E1, the GDP level is identical, 2,222.22. All right, so this is the equilibrium GDP level. At E1, AE is equal to Y. Now, how do we deal with this increase in the personal income tax rate? Let me switch colors. Let me switch to blue. So, when the personal income tax rate increases, we would represent graphically this change as a downward shift of the AE curve. So this blue curve becomes AE curve 2, right? So the AE curve has shifted from AE curve 1 to AE curve 2, and this is due to an increase in the personal income tax rate, which has decreased disposable income, which in turn has decreased consumption, which in turn has decreased the GDP level. So the new equilibrium is right here. It's at E2. So what does E2 tell us? E2 tells us that we now have a new level of aggregate expenditures, which is now equal equal to 1,538.46. So what happened to aggregate expenditures? They went down from this point here to this point here. All right. Now, what happens to GDP? GDP falls to Y2 from 2,222.22 to 1,538.46. All right. So this new equilibrium, E2, it represents an equality between aggregate expenditures and national income. Now, you will notice that the new aggregate expenditure curve, AE curve 2, it started from this point here. It started from autonomous aggregate expenditures. Why is that so? Well, because none of the autonomous factors changed. Autonomous consumption did not change. Autonomous investments did not change. Autonomous government spending did not change. Autonomous net exports did not change.